It was the invitation that made Emily's heart skip a beat. A wedding invitation from her ex, a man she had once envisioned a future with. The card, white and elegantly simple, came with the usual flowery words about love and new beginnings. But for Emily, it was nothing but a reminder of the past, a past that she had worked so hard to leave behind. She stared at the card for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edges as her mind raced. Lucas, the man she had once thought she would marry. He was now getting married to someone else. Emily had heard the news through mutual friends, but seeing the official invitation in her hands made it all feel so real. And painful. It had been 2 years since they broke up, yet it felt as though she had only just moved past the hurt. When they had first met, it had been magic. Lucas had swept her off her feet with his charm, his ambition, and his dreams of a future together. They had talked about everything, where they would live, what their kids would be like, the adventures they would go on. But somewhere along the way, their dreams stopped aligning. Emily had always been the more grounded one, while Lucas had been driven by his ambitions, his work, and the pursuit of his own success. Eventually, they had drifted apart. Lucas had fallen for someone else, and though Emily tried to be happy for him, the pain of seeing him move on had been too much. She hadn't expected it to hurt this badly, but the wound had been deep. After months of trying to figure out how to get over him, she had finally made peace with the breakup. Or so she thought. The invitation felt like a test she hadn't prepared for. Should she go? Was she ready to face Lucas and the life he was building without her? She wasn't sure. But she knew one thing. She couldn't let him see her as someone who was still stuck in the past. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from Mia, her best friend. Mia had been with her through the entire roller coaster of her relationship with Lucas, and she had never once let Emily down. Emily quickly opened the text. "Are you going to the wedding?" It read, "You know we'll have fun either way, but if you decide to go, I need to know. The wedding's in a week." Emily paused before replying. She had been avoiding talking about it, unsure of how to face the situation. But Mia's question felt like the push she needed. "I'm thinking about it, but I don't know if I can handle seeing Lucas with someone else." Mia's response came quickly. "Well, if you do decide to go, I have the perfect plan." Emily frowned, a little confused. "What do you mean, a plan?" Mia's next message made her chuckle, though she couldn't tell if Mia was being serious or just trying to lighten the mood. "Simple, get yourself a date. Not just any date, though. Get someone who will make Lucas wish he was still with you. You know, someone who makes him jealous." Emily laughed at the idea. It seemed ridiculous, but then again, it didn't sound half bad. Maybe it was the perfect solution. If she was going to go to this wedding and face Lucas, she didn't want to do it alone. And the thought of showing up with someone else seemed like a way to prove to herself and to Lucas that she had moved on. "I don't know, Mia. Who would even want to go with me?" Emily typed. Mia's reply came with the same fast pace. "That's easy. You know Ryan, right? The CEO guy we met at Jessica's dinner last month? He's perfect, and I know you've been talking to him a bit. Why not ask him?" Emily had met Ryan just once at a dinner party, where he had impressed everyone with his confidence, wealth, and charisma. He was the CEO of a tech company, and though Emily had only exchanged a few words with him, she couldn't help but be intrigued by his aura. He had seemed out of her league, but there was something about his calm demeanor that had made her feel comfortable in his presence. She hadn't thought much about him after the dinner, but now Mia's suggestion seemed to make more sense. "I don't know. Mia, I barely know him," Emily replied. Mia, never one to back down from an idea she believed in, responded instantly. "You barely know him, true, but you're not asking him for a relationship, just a favor. He doesn't have to be a long-term date, just someone to make a statement." Emily thought about it for a moment. She really didn't want to go alone, and having someone like Ryan by her side could help her feel more confident. He was successful, attractive, and completely unrelated to her past with Lucas. What better way to show Lucas she had moved on than by bringing a man who was out of his league? "Fine, I'll do it," Emily finally texted back. The next few days passed in a blur as Emily found herself working up the courage to reach out to Ryan. She was nervous, unsure of how to ask such a favor. Would he even say yes? She didn't want to come across as desperate or weird, but Mia's words echoed in her mind. It was just one day to show Lucas that she had moved on. She spent the next day drafting and redrafting her message to Ryan. Each version seemed more awkward than the last, until finally she just sent a simple text. Hey, Ryan, this might be a little out of the blue, but I have a weird request. I need a favor. Would you be willing to pretend to be my date for a wedding? I'll understand if it's too much, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to ask. She pressed send, immediately regretting her decision. What if he thought she was crazy? What if he thought she was trying too hard? But just as she was about to put her phone down and forget about it, a reply came through. Sure, I can do that. I'll be your date. Just promise me we'll have some fun while we're at it. What's the wedding, by the way? Emily's heart raced as she read his response. She couldn't believe it. He had agreed. It felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She was going to the wedding, and she wasn't going to face it alone. She smiled and typed back quickly. Thanks, Ryan. You're a lifesaver. It's Lucas's wedding. I'll tell you more later. See you then. Ryan's reply was swift. Sounds interesting. Looking forward to it. Emily couldn't help but laugh at herself. She had done it. She had asked someone she barely knew to be her date for her ex's wedding, and he had said yes. But as she put her phone down and stared out the window, her excitement was mixed with nervousness. Was she ready for this? Was she ready to face Lucas and all the memories they had shared? All the pain and love that had once been a part of her life? She didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing for sure. This wedding was going to be an interesting day. The day of the wedding arrived faster than Emily had anticipated. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, a slight breeze, and the kind of crisp air that made you want to step outside and take in the world. Emily stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress one last time. It was a simple navy blue gown that was elegant without being too flashy. She wanted to look confident, but not like she was trying too hard. She glanced at the clock. Ryan would be picking her up soon, and her nerves were beginning to get the best of her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. There was no turning back now. She had agreed to this, and now it was time to face what was ahead. Lucas's wedding. Her ex, the man who had once been her everything, was getting married to someone else. And here she was, about to walk into that room with a man who just a week ago she barely knew. As she finished her makeup and hair, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia. Remember, you got this. You look amazing. And most importantly, have fun. You're not doing this for anyone but yourself. Emily smiled as she read the text. Mia had always been the one to encourage her to take risks, to embrace the uncertainty. She was the friend who could always make Emily feel like she could do anything. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Ryan. Hey, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 10. Emily quickly replied, Great, see you soon. Ryan. She still couldn't believe he had agreed to come. He had seemed so calm about it all, as though it was just another regular night for him. The kind of night he probably had on a regular basis, filled with high-end events and gatherings with people he barely knew. Emily, on the other hand, was feeling the pressure. This wasn't just a night out. This was Lucas's wedding. The wedding she had never thought she would have to attend, not after everything that had happened. A knock at the door startled her. She walked over, took one last look at herself in the mirror and opened it. There stood Ryan, looking as dashing as ever in his sharp black suit. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his eyes sparkled with a mix of confidence and something else Emily couldn't quite place. You look stunning, he said with a smile that could easily melt any tension. Emily blinked, surprised by how effortlessly he complimented her. She smiled back, trying to mask her nervousness. Thanks. You look pretty good yourself. Ryan grinned. Ready for this? Emily took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. He chuckled and extended his arm. Then let's go. It's showtime. As they drove to the venue, Emily found herself feeling a little more at ease. Ryan's easygoing nature helped distract her from the impending awkwardness of walking into a wedding, where she knew she would face her ex. She tried to make small talk, asking him about his work, about his company, but he seemed more interested in asking her questions. They spoke about everything from their favorite books to random life experiences. His calmness made her feel like she wasn't walking into a firestorm of emotions. Before they knew it, they arrived at the wedding venue. It was a grand estate, the kind of place where people's dreams of fairy tale weddings came true. The gardens were lush and filled with beautiful flowers, the stone walkway leading up to the ornate entrance gleaming in the soft afternoon sun. Guests were milling about, enjoying drinks and appetizers while waiting for the ceremony to begin. Ryan helped Emily out of the car, and they walked toward the entrance together. Emily's heart began to race again as they stepped into the crowd. The moment she crossed the threshold, she spotted Lucas. He was standing by the bar, laughing with some of the other guests. When his eyes met hers, his expression shifted just slightly, recognition, surprise, and maybe even a hint of guilt. For a moment, Emily stood frozen. She hadn't realized how much she was dreading this moment, but now that it was happening, she couldn't help but feel a wave of anxiety flood over her. She was about to face him, face her past, and it felt like everything from those years together was rushing back in a single instant. Ryan, sensing the shift in her energy, turned toward her and gave her a reassuring smile. "You okay?" Emily nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "Yeah, I'm fine." They walked further into the room, heading toward the group of guests gathered near the back. As they made their way through the crowd, Emily could hear the low hum of conversations, the clink of glasses, and the sound of laughter. Everything felt strangely surreal. She had never imagined herself at this wedding, let alone with Ryan by her side. As they reached the drinks table, Emily scanned the room once more. There were so many familiar faces, people she hadn't seen in years. It felt like being thrown into a time capsule of her past. Lucas was now standing across the room, chatting with his fiancée, and for a moment, Emily couldn't help but compare the woman he was about to marry with the person she used to be, the woman he once chose. "You know," Ryan said, his voice breaking through her thoughts, "I'll admit I don't know much about weddings, but this one's impressive." Emily gave a small laugh. "Yeah, Lucas always had expensive tastes. He wanted everything to be perfect." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" Emily sighed. It was always about perfection with him. The perfect life, the perfect career, the perfect future. He just didn't see that we were never going to get there. Ryan nodded as if he understood, though he didn't press her for more details. He was a man of few words when it came to deeper subjects. But Emily appreciated the fact that he wasn't pushing her to explain herself. As the ceremony started, the crowd quieted, and everyone turned their attention to the front. Emily stood beside Ryan, feeling the familiar tension in her shoulders, but she tried her best to keep it together. She wasn't there to dwell on the past, she reminded herself. She was there to be in the moment, to show herself and maybe even Lucas that she was fine. The ceremony was beautiful, as most weddings were. The bride, Lucas's fiancée, looked stunning in her white dress, and Lucas, standing beside her, looked the part of the happy groom. But Emily couldn't help but feel a strange distance between herself and the moment. She wasn't sure if it was the way Lucas had looked at her, or if it was the emotional weight of being there in the first place. But throughout the ceremony, one thing became clear. She wasn't the same person she had been when she was with Lucas. The person standing there with Ryan, calm and collected, was stronger, more self-assured. The vows were exchanged and the crowd cheered. Emily clapped, but her mind was elsewhere. She caught a glimpse of Ryan out of the corner of her eye, his relaxed demeanor, the way he didn't seem fazed by the ceremony or the crowd. He was comfortable in his own skin, and somehow that made her feel more comfortable too. As the ceremony concluded and the guests began to gather for the reception, Emily found herself walking beside Ryan toward the grand hall. She could feel her heart beating faster again. The wedding had been beautiful, but now came the part she dreaded most: the reception. The reception hall was nothing short of breathtaking. The grand chandelier hanging from the ceiling sparkled like 1,000 stars, casting a warm golden glow over the guests who mingled and chatted. Tables were draped in white linen, adorned with soft candlelight and floral arrangements that added a sense of elegance to the space. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft melodies of a live band in the background. Emily, still feeling the odd weight of being at her ex's wedding, found herself walking beside Ryan as they entered the room. He was tall, well-spoken, and exuded an aura of confidence that made her feel a little less out of place. They made their way to the drinks table, and Ryan poured them each a glass of champagne. "Here's to surviving the ceremony," he said with a playful grin, handing her a flute. Emily raised her glass, a slight chuckle escaping her lips. "Here's to surviving the whole evening." Ryan took a sip of his champagne, surveying the room. You know, I have to admit I'm actually enjoying this more than I expected. It's been a while since I've been to something so fancy. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of relief at how comfortable Ryan seemed. His presence made everything feel less awkward, and the idea of pretending to be a couple didn't feel as forced as it had at first. Maybe it was because he didn't treat her like someone caught in an uncomfortable situation. He was just there, offering her a space to be herself without any pressure. They took their time at the drinks table, chatting with a few other guests who approached them, mostly people Emily recognized from her past. Lucas's family, old friends, and acquaintances who had all been part of her life once upon a time. She exchanged pleasantries, but there was a distance in her smile. Every time she glanced at Lucas, who was talking with his fiancée and a group of friends near the dance floor, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was regret or just nostalgia for a past that had once seemed so certain. Ryan, sensing her unease, leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to. I'm here, remember? His words were simple, but they had an effect on her. It was as if he was giving her permission to let go of the expectations, to stop pretending. She nodded, offering him a smile that felt a little more genuine than the ones she had been giving to the other guests. Thanks, I think I needed that. Ryan smiled back, and for a moment they simply stood there, enjoying the hum of the room around them. There was a comfort in the silence between them, an unspoken understanding. Neither of them was trying to force a conversation or act out of place. They were just two people, standing together in a room full of strangers. As the evening wore on, the reception shifted into full swing. The newlyweds took their place on the dance floor for their first dance, the band playing a soft romantic tune that filled the room. Emily watched them, a little detached, as they swayed together, wrapped in each other's arms. There was something about the scene that felt surreal to her. She wasn't sure if it was the fact that she was here with Ryan, or the reality that Lucas, the person she had once planned a life with, was now someone else's. Ryan, noticing the direction of her gaze, turned to her with a raised eyebrow. You okay? Emily nodded, though her chest felt tight. Yeah, just a little nostalgic, I guess. It's strange seeing someone you thought you'd be with forever moving on. Ryan didn't respond immediately, but his expression softened. He understood that feeling. There was a certain emptiness in watching someone else take your place in the story of your life. You know, he began after a pause. I've been there. It's not easy watching someone move on while you're still figuring things out. Emily looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. She had always seen Ryan as someone who had it all together, successful, confident, and always in control. But now, hearing him speak so honestly, she realized that perhaps they weren't so different after all. They both had their own stories, their own struggles. Thanks for saying that, she replied softly. It's just hard, you know? It's like, I'm here with you, but part of me is still stuck in the past, trying to let go of who I thought I was going to be with. Ryan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It's tough, but it's also about realizing that life has a way of taking you in unexpected directions. Sometimes the story you thought you were writing isn't the one that's meant for you. His words struck a chord in Emily. She had spent so long holding on to an idea of who she thought she would be, of the future she had imagined with Lucas. But maybe Ryan was right. Maybe it was time to stop trying to rewrite the past and start embracing the future, however uncertain it seemed. As the music continued to play and the dance floor filled with couples, Emily and Ryan made their way over to a quieter corner of the room. Ryan found them a small, secluded spot near the windows, away from the noise and the crowd. The cool night air drifted in from the open window, offering a brief respite from the heat of the ballroom. They stood there for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Emily could see the way Ryan's eyes flickered from time to time, as if he was trying to figure out his next move. He wasn't one to stay in one place for too long, but tonight was different. He seemed content, as if he was simply allowing himself to be present with her without the usual distractions. I wasn't sure how this night would go, Emily said, breaking the silence. I wasn't sure how I'd feel being here or how I'd feel about everything. Ryan turned toward her, his gaze steady. And it's been okay, she admitted, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. Better than I expected, actually. Having you here makes it easier. Ryan gave her a playful smile. Well, I aim to please. They both laughed, the sound of it light and easy, like the weight of the evening had lifted for a moment. It was a simple thing, but it felt good. For the first time that night, Emily felt like she could breathe. As the reception continued, the evening began to take on a different rhythm. Guests were more relaxed now, laughing and talking, the earlier tension of the ceremony dissipating. Emily found herself laughing more freely, engaging in conversations with people she hadn't spoken to in years. She even danced with Ryan once or twice, the music playing in the background as they moved together on the dance floor. It wasn't romantic, but it was fun, lighthearted, a reminder that life didn't have to be weighed down by the past. But even as the night wore on, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She had come to the wedding expecting to face old ghosts, to deal with the lingering emotions from her past with Lucas. Instead, she had found herself enjoying the night, laughing, and feeling more alive than she had in a long time. Ryan had been there for her in ways she hadn't expected. And while she wasn't sure what the future held, she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, this night was the beginning of something new. The evening was winding down, the energy of the reception slowly beginning to fade as guests trickled out, their conversations quieter and more relaxed. Emily found herself standing by one of the large windows overlooking the garden, watching the last few guests gather their coats and say their goodbyes. It felt like the night had flown by, and yet, in so many ways, it had also felt like a lifetime. Ryan was nearby, chatting with a few people, but Emily found herself lost in her thoughts. The wedding had been everything she expected and nothing like she'd imagined. The awkwardness, the nostalgia, the heaviness of seeing Lucas again. It was all still there, but somehow it didn't feel as overwhelming as it had earlier. In fact, as the night went on, she had begun to realize something. She didn't need to prove anything to Lucas. She didn't need to show him that she had moved on, or that she was happy. She just needed to be herself. It wasn't about the external validation. It wasn't about showing Lucas what he had lost. It was about finding peace within herself. She turned her attention back to the window, watching the soft glow of the streetlights outside. The garden looked beautiful, bathed in moonlight, but it also felt like a reminder of everything she had left behind. The person she had been when she was with Lucas, the person who had walked down the aisle in her mind, dreaming of the future. That person no longer existed. Ryan's voice broke through her reverie as he approached her, a soft smile on his face. "You okay?" Emily nodded, her gaze still fixed on the garden. "Yeah, just thinking." Ryan joined her by the window, standing in comfortable silence. The evening was winding down and the crowd had mostly dispersed. It was a strange feeling, the quiet after the chaos of the wedding. Emily hadn't expected to feel so calm, so at peace with everything. "I guess we're about to head out," Ryan said, breaking the silence again. "But I'm glad I came. This night turned out better than I thought." Emily looked at him, her heart warming at his words. "Yeah, me too. I didn't expect to have so much fun." Ryan grinned, his eyes sparkling. "Well, I'm glad I could help." There was something in his tone, something playful yet genuine, that made Emily feel more comfortable around him. He wasn't just a date for the night. He had become someone she could rely on, someone who had been there when she needed him most. And as much as she tried to remind herself that this was just a one-time thing, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of connection she felt with him. "You know," Emily said, her voice quieter now, "I didn't think I would be able to do this. I didn't think I could come here and face everyone, especially Lucas, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be." Ryan gave her a thoughtful look, his expression softening. "I'm glad. Sometimes we build things up in our heads, imagining how difficult they'll be, but then we face them and realize they're not as scary as we thought." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude for the way Ryan had made this evening bearable. She didn't know what he saw in her, what made him want to show up at the wedding, but she was starting to appreciate the calm presence he had brought into her life. "Thanks for being here," she said, turning to him fully. "It really did make a difference." Ryan shrugged, his smile still there, but this time there was something more serious in his eyes. "I told you I'm happy to help. You don't have to do things like this alone." Emily met his gaze, and for a brief moment she saw something in his eyes that she couldn't quite place. Something deeper, something more personal. But just as quickly it was gone. replaced by the casual charm he always carried with him. "Are you ready to go?" Ryan asked, breaking the moment between them. Emily nodded. "Yeah, let's go. It's getting late." They made their way to the car, the air outside cool and refreshing. The night felt quiet, almost surreal. Emily had expected to feel emotional, to be overwhelmed by the weight of the past. But instead she felt light. The burden she had carried for so long, the fear of facing her ex and the ghosts of their past, had been lifted. She wasn't sure if it was because of Ryan's presence or if it was something within herself, but she felt different, stronger. As they drove away from the venue, Emily couldn't help but glance at Ryan. He was focused on the road, his hands firmly gripping the steering wheel, but there was an ease to him. He had been nothing but kind, supportive, and understanding throughout the evening. And as the night stretched on, Emily found herself wondering if there was more to this connection than just the one night. She turned her gaze back to the window, watching the city lights pass by. She didn't have all the answers. In fact, she wasn't sure if she ever would. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. She was moving forward, and that felt good. The next few days were a blur of messages and phone calls. The wedding was behind her now, but the impact of the evening lingered. Emily found herself thinking about Ryan more than she had expected. He had been so easy to talk to, so natural in a way that made her forget all the pretense she usually carried. It wasn't like her to open up to someone so quickly, especially not someone she barely knew, but with Ryan, things felt different. They had agreed to meet up a few days after the wedding, just to catch up. At first, Emily had hesitated. Was it too soon? Was it weird to keep seeing him after such a random and unexpected night? But as the days passed, she found herself looking forward to their next meeting. It wasn't that she was rushing into anything. It was more about the connection they had shared. The simple fact that she felt comfortable around him in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. They met at a small cafe downtown, one that was cozy and quiet, the kind of place where people could lose track of time. Ryan was already there when she arrived, sitting by the window with a coffee in hand. He looked up when she walked in, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, you," he greeted her, standing up to pull out a chair for her. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of warmth at his gesture. "Hey." They settled into their seats, the conversation flowing easily. They talked about everything, work, life, small talk that felt strangely comforting. But as they spoke, Emily couldn't help but feel a shift in the air between them. The chemistry that had been there at the wedding, the connection she had felt without even realizing it, was still there. It was subtle, but it was there. "I'm glad we're doing this," Ryan said after a moment, his tone softening. "I had a good time at the wedding, but I think I enjoyed this even more." Emily looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't sure where this was going or what it meant, but in that moment she knew that whatever it was real. "I'm glad too," she replied, her smile genuine. "It's nice to just be ourselves without all the expectations, just two people getting to know each other." Ryan nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a new level of sincerity. "Exactly. And who knows where it goes from here, right? But I'm glad we're here now." Emily felt the weight of his words, the unspoken understanding that they were both in this moment together, navigating something that didn't have to be defined yet. It didn't need to be complicated. Not now. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt hopeful about the future. She wasn't sure where this connection with Ryan would lead, but she was ready to find out. As the weeks passed, Emily found herself settling into a routine she hadn't expected. The connection between her and Ryan had only deepened. What had started as a favor, a simple request to pretend to be her date for a day, had transformed into something real, something genuine. It wasn't that either of them had been looking for a relationship. It just happened. Naturally. Slowly. Ryan wasn't the kind of person to rush into things, and Emily wasn't either. They took their time getting to know each other, enjoying the quiet moments, the shared laughter, and the easy conversations that came with spending more time together. They went on hikes, grabbed coffee, and even attended a few more events together. What stood out to Emily was how effortlessly Ryan made her feel seen, understood. He wasn't the type to push her into something or make her feel like she needed to prove herself. They kept things light, but there was an undeniable chemistry between them. Emily had never felt so at ease with someone. She had spent so much of her life in relationships that were marked by expectations, by trying to meet someone else's idea of what a relationship should be. But with Ryan, it felt different. He never demanded anything of her. There were no rules, no pressures. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench in a small park, sipping iced coffees and watching the world go by, Emily glanced at Ryan. He had that relaxed, easy smile on his face, the one that made her feel as if there was no place else she'd rather be. She found herself thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. "I never expected any of this," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, thoughtful. Ryan looked at her, his eyes curious. "What do you mean?" "This," Emily gestured between them. "Us. I didn't think I'd be here like this with you. It's strange, isn't it?" Ryan smiled, a little amused but not in a mocking way. "It's not strange. It's just life doing its thing. Things don't always go the way we plan. Sometimes they turn out better than we expect." Emily paused, reflecting on his words. He was right. Life didn't always go according to the script you had in your head. And that was okay. In fact, it was more than okay. "I think I've been so focused on what I lost, on what didn't work out, that I forgot how to appreciate what's right in front of me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never realized how much I was holding on to things that were never meant to be." Ryan looked at her thoughtfully, setting his coffee down beside him. "It's easy to get caught up in that," he said gently. "But you can't live in the past. You can't keep holding on to something that's already gone." Emily nodded, a little sigh escaping her lips. "I know, it's just hard sometimes." "Life is hard sometimes," Ryan said with a quiet certainty. "But you're doing great. Don't forget that." There was something about his words, the way he said them, that made Emily feel both understood and empowered. It wasn't just the encouragement. It was the fact that he believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. As the days turned into weeks, Emily found herself less and less consumed by her past. She was finally starting to let go of Lucas and the life she thought they would have together. And it wasn't because she didn't care. It was because she realized that the future she had imagined wasn't meant for her. It was never going to be, and maybe, just maybe, that was okay. One evening, as they sat together on Ryan's balcony, the city lights casting a soft glow over the city below, Emily found herself thinking about what Ryan had said. Life did its own thing. Things didn't always turn out the way you expected them to, but sometimes that was exactly what you needed. "I'm glad we met," she said quietly, looking out at the city skyline. "I never would have thought that a wedding of all things would lead to this." Ryan chuckled softly, his gaze on her. "I'm glad too. You never know what's going to happen when you least expect it." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence was comfortable, filled only with the sounds of the city and the soft rustling of the wind. Emily leaned back in her chair, her eyes closed for a moment as she simply enjoyed the quiet. When she opened her eyes, Ryan was still looking at her, his gaze steady. "You know, I'm not saying this to rush things, but I like where this is going. Whatever this is, I don't want to put a label on it, but I like spending time with you, more than I expected." Emily smiled, her heart warming at his words. She didn't know where this would go or what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need to know. She didn't need all the answers. She was content with the way things were. "With Ryan, I like it too," she said softly. "I like it a lot." Ryan's smile softened, his eyes sincere. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." It was the simplest of statements, but it meant more than words could express. It was a promise not just of being together, but of being there for each other in whatever came next. Emily wasn't sure what the future held, but she was ready for it. She was ready to take it one step at a time. As the night grew darker and the city lights sparkled below them, Emily leaned back in her chair, a sense of peace settling over her. She wasn't sure if this was the start of something new, something permanent, but she knew one thing for sure: she had found something real. Something that didn't need to be rushed or forced, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough.